Okay, so it perfectly, I think, goes into our next question, which is that in my work, I often focus on like the quality or how smells can communicate a message, a very storytelling, smells of storytelling or for their hedonic qualities. So in aromatherapy, this is a very different case, or when you're using smells for their health or and wellness properties. Or for their physiological properties. So what does it mean to use smells and essential oils for their bodily and physiological properties?
Yeah, that's a great question, because as we set out to develop empirical evidence around the use of it, we thought, well, how does one do this? You know, traditionally, you would do a survey. Do you feel better? Do you feel worse? Is it this? Is it that? These sorts of things they're useful, but they can also be subjective. So to be really objective about it, when we say study for anxiety reduction, we measure heart rate, we measure cortisol levels, we measure blood pressure, standard processes, and use a placebo to control it. We really treat this in a very pharmaceutical-like manner. You had mentioned safety, and that leads to a very different discussion because of the regulatory framework involved with scent and essential oils and aromatherapy. I don't know how deep you want to get into that. We could probably do another episode on the regulatory frameworks because they differ worldwide.
Yeah.
But they all fall back on the self-regulatory mechanisms of the major producers, right? So they define for everybody what's really safe, and they make every effort to inform people. It's just scent itself doesn't lend itself to simple terms. So anyway, back to the point is what we had to do was create empirical evidence. So what's known about scent processing in the body, right? It's an electrical signal from a mucus pad at the back of the nose. It goes right to the amygdala and poof, into the brain, right? But it seems to go in three directions. It goes first physiologically, the things that we can measure. And that's why for us, we focus on the physiological measurements. But there's also memory, right? Everyone talks about Faust and the Faustian principles and how you can smell something from your grandma's house 40 years later and it transports you, So you've got that memory. And then there's the emotion. Billions of perfumes are sold every year because they're very emotional. And so suddenly you're talking emotion and memory. These are difficult to make empirical. They're just naturally subjective.
Yeah.
So in our work, we have to limit ourselves to only the things that can be measured until we more credibly prove the science behind things, how different formula, different naturals can yield results.
Can you provide one example of when this has, or one example where you have done this, found evidence based on smell or essential oil used for a physiological or bodily property or function?
Sure. We have, all the full text studies on our website, and take a long time to read those here. But let's say we did a large study at I have to be careful here, right? You're not supposed to say certain things. So we did a multi-month study in a large southeastern cancer center where thousands of patients were sampled during chemotherapy and infusion. And we measured the stressors, So the anxiety around the actual process. And then there was a secondary measure for mitigating nausea related to the process. So the nausea is fairly simple. It's a binary question. Did you or did you not experience nausea? So that's easy. You just check the box and count. But with the anxiety, right, you could ask, did you feel better? Did you feel worse? And questions were asked, and people did add some subjective results of feeling less stressed and so on. But in the end, we had to focus on the heart rate, the blood pressure, the cortisol swabbing, in addition to that. So then that study was packaged up and written. It was peer reviewed and appeared in the Journal of Oncology Nursing, right? That's just one example of a pretty solid study that provides actual empirical evidence that yields from smells.
Can you reveal what the smell was?
I can. So that's a great question, but let me preface the answer, because when it comes to difficult situations, trying to deal with traumas and stressors and pains and things like that, you never want to use a single note. I say it's not, you don't want to use a smell that you can run into in the wild. Because remember, we just spoke a few moments ago about memory. So if a memory of a fragrance is horrible, gut-wrenching nausea, you don't want to go back there if you're a survivor, right? So we have a very, I guess it's a unique approach of how we develop formulas. But I happen to have a nausea relief right here with me. So I can tell you it's got ginger, cardamom, spearmint, and fennel. Okay. We're never going to tell you what the proportions are.
Of course.
but that's how we protect our investment in studies.
Of course, yeah.
Right. And so, if you'd like a little anecdote about this memory trigger, we were in the same office building as a rape crisis center here in Cleveland. We created an uplifting scent that had some of the qualities of de-stressing, but also providing, again, it's hard to say these positive, uplifting things, but it's more subjective. Anyway, we put it all together. And for the clients of this particular center, it was effective during their counseling, right? It put them more at ease. They felt better about the area. So we thought, post-traumatic stress, let's take this to the Veterans Hospital and see how they react. It was a disaster because the veterans who had suffered injury are mostly from the Middle Eastern countries, where they were on patrol in cities where there was a lot of citrus smell. When they smelled what was effective for PTSD in the rape crisis center, it transported them back and increased their anxiety. It did not work in the same way. So this is how this intermixing of the physicality, the emotion, and the memory, they all intersect in a way that, bears thinking.
Yeah. And that's a very true statement also in the work that we do at Otaropa when we're working with museums, or we're talking with museums about the smells that they should be using in the spaces. It's really difficult because you never know what smell is going to trigger someone's memory in a bad or a good way, right? So if someone's in a museum space and then all of a sudden they're unexpectedly hit with this smell that produces a memory, it can be really problematic in a public space. So
right.
It's for smell in general, this is such a common challenge and hurdle that we all face, right? This connection between memory and smell that can impact our work greatly.
Sure, sure. I always, when I'm kind of stumped, I like to think of when we humans were back on the savannah, so to speak, evolving with the plants and the world around us. The sense of smell has played an enormous role in so many things, reproduction, selection of mates, food safety, danger, all these things. And then, 1800s, 1900s, we started to suppress our sense of smells. And we've lost a lot of that. And what we now experience is nothing like the natural world that, a few 100,000 years at least of, evolution has, we need to retrain, we need to relearn.
It's a very good message.
I hope so.